disability. As long as you have an impairment or a problem in body function or structure, you can already have some form of assistive technology. This very eyeglasses that I am wearing is already assistive technology. So it is actually something that we use every day, but we do not know that it's called assistive technology. Anything that will help us have a better or functional life.
The World Health Organization reports that only 1 in 10 people in need have access to these products. And since the onset of the pandemic, people from countries like the Philippines have even less access to assistive technology or only have access to poor quality product. Dr. Bundok, why is assistive technology so scarce here? And how did the pandemic further impact access to it?
Even in the absence of pandemic, there are 5 factors which hamper access to assistive technology. One is cost. Two is data. We do not actually know how many need it. Third is our topography. We are more than 7,100 islands and it's quite difficult to reach. Fourth is we lack the professionals who are capable of implementing or developing the assistive technology tools, supplies, and program. And last but not the least is we don't have local products. Everything is imported. So with the pandemic, aside from the fact that physical distance is a factor or a challenge in access, the pandemic added the factor of social distancing. So the more that the access to assistive technology has become scarce.
Now let's talk about one of the most common disabilities here in the Philippines, and that is vision impairment. Millions of Filipinos suffer from this, and many go undiagnosed. But actually, people with these problems can correct them, for the most part, by using eyeglasses. So what are some of the conditions that eyeglasses can help with?
Very obviously and most common is the error of refraction, but we also have astigmatism. We also have what we call a double vision. Or in children with cerebral palsy, for example, they have difficulty in controlling the eye movement. So these are some of the more common reasons why eyeglasses are prescribed.
So an optometrist or an ophthalmologist usually performs an eye
Yes.
exam to determine what type of eyeglasses work best for you. But unfortunately, many Filipinos don't have access to this, especially in distant provinces. So my question again for you, Dr. Penny, is it best to acquire glasses from an eye clinic, or can Filipinos get quality eyeglasses even from places like the mall?
Definitely, you go for quality eyeglasses. In fact, it is the program of the Department of Health to do early newborn screening so that they could be properly advised from the very beginning. Having it in the mall would be good, but if and only if there is also an ophthalmologist working with an optometrist who will be able to prescribe the proper type of eyeglasses that is needed. We should exercise caution because there are a lot of eyeglasses which are being sold without any prescription, and this will do more harm than good.
Now, from vision, let's talk about hearing naman. So because hearing loss, for the most part, affects the elderly, but many people who work in loud environments like construction places or factories may experience it as well. It also affects younger people due to prolonged use of earphones when listening to music, watching TV, and now attending online classes as well as meetings. Dr. Martinez, please explain to us the difference between noise-induced hearing loss and age-related hearing loss. What are some of its distinct symptoms?
When we talk about age-related hearing loss, no, it's hearing loss, it actually starts as early as when you are reaching the age of 50. But most of the data would say that the definition of age-related hearing loss is hearing loss that occurs from 60 and above. No, if you look at the global data, they say about 1/3 of people whose age is 75 and above would have some degree of hearing loss, which is age-related. That's part of the wear and tear of the organ. No, when we talk about noise-induced hearing loss, so that can actually occur at any age, for as long as you are exposed to noise, which is detrimental to your hearing, that can damage the inner ear, the hair cells of your cochlea, then that is noise-induced hearing loss. In fact, through a hearing test, you can differentiate the two.
Now, Dr. Martinez, let's talk about hearing aids because the use of hearing aids can help people with noise-induced or age-related hearing loss lessen that experience. They work by amplifying sounds, but it's more than just a microphone and speaker. It helps with specific frequencies. That's why, Dr. Martinez, what are some of the steps that Filipinos can take to obtain a hearing aid after, of course, being properly diagnosed? And how does one know which type works best?
You have to have a hearing test. So we know the pattern of your hearing loss. We know if it is, say, for example, conductive hearing loss that may affect the canal of the ear or even the middle ear, which can be remedied medically or even surgically. No? If it is something that is irreversible, then we consider hearing aids. And again, that will rely on your hearing test.
Apart from hearing and vision impairments, many Filipinos deal with mobility issues. Now, what are the assistive technologies that can help them move around and enjoy their independence? We'll answer that after the break. We're your partner in healthcare. You're watching Medtalk Health Talk.
SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay. SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay.
RPN DXKT 1071 sa dial sa inyong mga radyo.
I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome back to Medtalk Health Talk. Today, we shed light on assistive technologies available that can significantly improve the lives of persons with disabilities. Let's talk about technologies available for mobility. Many Filipinos, both old and young, endure fractures, injuries, and health conditions that may lead to amputation or even loss of limb function. On the other hand, some are born with disabilities that may prevent them from walking properly or walking altogether. Doc Penny, what are some of the technologies that are available in the Philippines that will address mobility, and how do they work?
So actually, there are a lot of assistive technology for mobility. And you could have this the talking phones or self-directed devices which have sensors that would assist for mobility and orienteering. And then we have the basic canes, crutches, walkers for those who have still some level of function with their legs, no? And we go down to the level of your wheelchairs. The wheelchairs could be basic for those who just have orthopedic problems, or it could be supportive for those who have stroke or with neuromuscular disorders. And for people who are really paralyzed from the neck down, or would have some difficulty in control of the wheelchair, then we also have what we call our motorized wheelchairs. So these are the most common assistive technology for mobility for people who have intact limbs. For those who have a limb which is absent, whether it's in the upper or lower extremity, we have what we call the prosthesis or the artificial limbs. So by far, those are the common assistive technology for people with mobility disability.
Dr. Penny, let's talk a little bit about canes and crutches because this is very common, especially habang tumatanda or even if they have a disability. Could you tell us what exactly are they for and how important is it that someone gets the proper equipment for this?
So everything should be customized. So we just don't buy over the counter the cane or the crutch. People might be skeptical, but we actually measure the length of the cane, and then we fit it to the one who would use it. There's a certain degree or angle of the elbow that is required, and a certain distance from the foot that is required also when you are walking with the crutch or the cane. So it is very essential and very important for safety and functionality that we are able to measure and customize the cane or the crutch for the one who will use it.
Now, Dr. Penny, you mentioned about prosthetic limbs. There's a lot of mystery about this because a lot of people, the first thing they will think about when it comes to prosthesis is this is very expensive. How important is having a prosthetic limb either for the leg or for the arm? How can Filipinos be qualified for a prosthetic limb if they indeed need one?
There are two purposes for your prosthetic limb. That is for prosthesis and more importantly, body image completion, particularly for the upper limb because it's exposed. No, it's a part of the body which is readily seen. For the lower extremities, the artificial limb or the prosthesis is more essential for walking. So these are the two main goals while we use a prosthesis. As for affordability, because of the establishment of the Philippine School of Prosthetics and Orthotics, and because of the field health packages for all types of prosthesis and orthosis, the prosthesis now for upper and lower limbs have become accessible and also affordable. So what is essential right now is just for people to be more aware of the services that are available and where they would go to in order to avail of this prosthesis.
The area in our body which produces the voice, the larynx, or commonly known as the voice box, dito nanggagaling ang boses ng isang tao. But because of maybe disease, malignancy, or maybe trauma, this could be injured and the person loses the ability to produce sound or have a voice. Are there options as well, Dr. Martinez, for those who have lost their voice?
They have a way of, or a technique of allowing the muscles of the neck to vibrate, the muscles of the esophagus to move, so they produce voice, no? At the same time, you can actually use a gadget, no? There is what you call an electrolytic, so it's a gadget that you put on the neck, so it will enhance the vibration and you produce a more reasonable type of voice, no? Now, during the surgery, you can create a connection between the windpipe and into the esophagus using a prosthesis also. So with that, we call that the Blom-Singer prosthesis. We don't really have to use any gadget anymore, because the air will be diverted from the windpipe into that hole. It's connected to the esophagus, and then you can produce good voice also. So there are certain surgical procedures that will actually create that also, no?
Now, a common disability all over the world includes heart problems. In fact, heart disease is the leading cause of death. Now, your doctor might prescribe a pacemaker for those with certain heart conditions. Dr. Penny, let's talk about pacemakers. Maraming sa ating mga viewers ang nakarinig nito, but when is this recommended?
Basically, the pacemaker makes sure that the heartbeat is good enough that would allow the recipient to be functional for all his activities of daily living. However, I know that there are certain precautions or risks that are associated with the use of the pacemaker, and it would really be best that a proper evaluation would be done by the cardiologist and the cardiovascular surgeon prior to undergoing the procedure.
Many people suffer from communication problems, but there are devices and apps that can help with speech as well as language. Now, what are these assistive technologies? More on this when we return. Your health is our mission here on Medtalk Health Talk. We'll be right back.
SMC San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao, para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay. SMC San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC. Aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay.
RPN DXKT 1071 sa dial sa inyong mga radyo.
I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome back to Medtalk Health Talk. Many people around the world suffer from some form of communication problem, but there are many devices available today to help these individuals communicate effectively. Dr. Penny, what are some of these technologies? And could you tell us a little bit about how they can help those who are visually impaired, hearing impaired, as well as voice impaired?
So in terms of communication for the visually impaired, we have the Braille. And then we also have applications in the cell phones wherein text could be converted to speech or speech can be converted into text. For our hearing impaired, we actually have the very basic sign language. But recently, they have developed a glove in which you would make motions and the sensors in the glove are able to convert it into speech or text also.
Now, one of the more common ways for the hearing impaired to communicate is through sign language, either those who are hearing impaired or vocally impaired. Dr. Martinez, let's talk about sign language for those who have lost their ability to hear or their ability to speak. Do we have our own version here in the Philippines? How can, are there areas where people can learn sign language?
Yeah, we have the so-called Filipino Sign Language. No, this is something that was developed, and the proponents of this one are based at the institution in the University of the Philippines, the Filipino Sign Language, and the group also from Saint Benilde actually were instrumental in coming up with this Filipino Sign Language. But for purposes of international communication, then more common will be the American Sign Language. No?
Now, Dr. Martinez, in this day and age of gadgets, cell phones, smartphones, iPad tablets, has the communication skills when it comes to those who are hearing impaired or even speech impaired, has it changed for the better? Is it easier now for people to communicate?
Gadgets have revolutionized communication. So for people, for example, no, instead of using sign language, basically they just text the message to another individual. So whether you are hearing impaired or not, then you can easily do that. No? As mentioned by Penny, when you try to communicate, no, the words that you say will be translated in real time into text. So a hearing impaired individual can benefit from that. So as I said, communication skills and because of technology that's drastically improved.
Every day we come up with new technologies to create an inclusive space for each person living with a disability. Dr. Penny, before we go, do you have any advice on how can we best enable the disabled?
What is very important is for people to understand that assistive technology does not ensure that you would be functional and be able to say it usefully. It is very important that with the crutches, the cane that are given to you, the prosthesis provided in the wheelchairs, you should also undergo training in its use. Not only of the person who would use it, but also the family and the caregiver, because this would mean also aftercare, maintenance, and proper utilization of the assistive technology. So this is very essential. Assistive technology plus training and or rehabilitation.
And Dr. Martinez, before we go, do you have any advice for our viewers?
Hearing disability is an invisible disability, no? So we should not take it for granted. No? We should know how to deal with the hearing impaired, especially for elderly, because we have to realize that we will get there at some point in time. Okay, so gadgets are something that will help us, but we make sure that we be patient enough to benefit from these gadgets. No? And when it comes to noise-induced hearing loss, you know, it is irreversible, but definitely preventable. So we know how to protect ourselves so that this will not reach to a point where we have difficulty communicating.
And with that, I'd like to thank rehab medicine specialist Dr. Josephine Bundok and ENT head and neck surgeon Dr. Norberto Martinez for sharing your insights with us today. We appreciate your time very much. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez. Thank you for watching Medtalk Health Talk. We'll see you again next time.
SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao, para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay. SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa